Hello, my fellow viewers and subscribers. This is Superchocolatemilkshake, and I am here talking about the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, first of all, I do have positives, and I have a lot of negatives. Yes, more negatives than positives. That's not a very good sign, especially coming from an avid Nintendo fan like me. But, first of all, I don't think Nintendo should ever escape criticism, even if I'm a fan. And second of all, I would have to say that there is a bit of a ray of hope, but I'll get to that when I get to the end of the video. So stay tuned, folks. So anyway, let's talk about the Nintendo Switch 2. The presentation actually was pretty good. I'm not going to lie. The Nintendo Switch 2 Direct was not the best Direct in the world, but honestly, it certainly was entertaining enough and it kept me intrigued and involved, and it had a lot of fun surprises to it. Like, honestly, Mario Kart World, I actually kind of want to play that one. I just want to see how fun it is. Also, Donkey Kong Bonanza also looks like a really fun game. Then, of course, also, not to mention, I was surprised to see Deltarune get an announcement, and a lot of people were also shocked to see Hollow Knight 2. Oh, yeah, and its successor to Bloodborne, too. I've never played Bloodborne before, but honestly, I'm kind of curious to see how that one plays out, too. But anyway, neither here nor there. Now that I'm done with the pros, yes, I am done with the pros, that's weird, I'm going to start talking about the cons. Because a lot of people are all in simultaneous agreement that this is way too freaking much money to be asking. So, of course, let's just start off with the console itself. $450. Well, $500 if you want to do the bundle. And the bundle bothers me just a little bit, but I'll get to that here in a moment. So, $450 for the Nintendo Switch console. Honestly, I don't think this is the best asking price. In fact, when it comes down to it, compared to the PlayStation 5, people are going to be starting to weigh their options. In fact, when it comes down to it, even the Valve Steam Deck people are going to be weighing their options. Even though, honestly, to be fair, Valve isn't really necessarily as much as a household name as Nintendo is. And I know Valve fans are going to be crying in the comments about this, but let me say this. How many Team Fortress 2, Portal, and Half-Life toys do you see sitting on store shelves? Not very many. When you go out, you see more Mario, Donkey Kong, Zelda, Kirby, like Pokemon. Pokemon is absolutely everywhere. You can't escape the Pokemania, man. Like, honestly, when it comes down to it, when you see that kind of stuff, like, you immediately know that's Nintendo. And guess what? Nintendo has become more of a household name because of most of that iconicness and merchandise and all that other stuff. So basically, when you're weighing against the Steam Deck versus Nintendo, of course, people would choose the Nintendo console. Well, maybe except for in this case. Well, okay, not unless you're talking about the original Switch, which then, of course, in that case, yes, more families and more people would probably be willing to choose the Nintendo console because they're more than likely going to recognize Mario or Pikachu. Heck, maybe Zelda to a minor extent. Or maybe even so much to a minor extent, like Kirby, you know? Like, they will be more than willing to recognize these characters more than they would be willing to recognize the characters from a game like Half-Life, or Portal, or Team Fortress 2. Even if these games have their influence. So as much as some of these Valve diehards are going to cry in the comments. And okay, fine. I do actually appreciate Valve as a company too. Actually, tell you the truth, even if I didn't learn about them until my high school year, which really should tell you about how much influence and how much of a household name they really are. Like, if I didn't know about the Gmod, if I didn't watch any Gmod videos when I was in high school, because my friends introduced me to them, like, I wouldn't have never known Valve would have existed as a company. So again, when it comes down to it, the Nintendo Switch 2 really only has like maybe two real competitors, and that is the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox 3 and the Xbox. And I don't think the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to compete very well with them. See, this is the thing that made the original Nintendo Switch so profitable and so work well, and it worked well for Nintendo anyway, and that is this. It was a cheap console. $300, even if it was a bit steep for that console, it still was a decent asking point. It was a decent asking price. And you know what? When it came out during the time of the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, it still was the cheapest console of that generation too. This generation and last generation, it's still considered the cheapest console out of all of them. And it really goes to show. Sorry, my nose is starting to get a little bit plugged up here. I don't know why. But, like, that's the thing. Like, it's kind of amazing to think that Nintendo has outsold all their competition by having the cheapest console on the market. And, that's kind of what makes Nintendo such a family brand, too, because they are a cheap set of consoles. They do sell most of their consoles for about as cheap as they can, with some minor exceptions, but I'll get to that when I get to that. And honestly, even if the games make up the prices, it still doesn't necessarily mean that they're always going to be $60 total either. Sometimes Nintendo has given out some discounts, not very good discounts, but discounts nonetheless. And of course, not to mention, I have seen a few Switch games also be sold for about $30, but then of course, that may be third-party stuff. Still, neither here nor there, the prices of the games weren't that bad either, especially if you compare it to like the Xbox and the Sony PlayStation, where most of their games are being sold for $70. Like the Nintendo Switch only had one game that was sold for $70, and that was Breath of the Wild. Oh, I mean, not Breath of the Wild, but Tears of the Kingdom. Sorry, I need to get my game straight here. Breath of the Wild was the first game, and that was $60. Tears of the Kingdom was $70. And again, like, that was the most expensive game. And honestly, people still bought that and lapped it up. And honestly, you could probably get it for a lot cheaper on Amazon right now. Well, only depending. We'll see how much the economy goes to pot, but that's neither here nor there. And, like, you could still enjoy it. On the Nintendo Switch 2 right now, though, like, this is where the outrage starts, okay? And it's not just with the price of the console alone, but it's the price of the games that Nintendo has to offer. Up to $80 frickin' dollars. Let that sink in. They're asking almost $100 to play their games. Yeah, I don't think I have $450 to spend on a new Nintendo Switch console, and then $100 plus that to buy a game. Like, that's kind of a ridiculous ask, and by the time you get to it, you're over $1,000 at that point. Like, that's just ridiculous. It's stupid. The greed knows no end. And honestly, it's just upsetting to see this. There's a reason why there's a lot of people who are spamming stuff on Treehouse Live that says, lower the prices, drop the prices. These games would be so much better if they were cheaper, because they're outraged. And you know what? What's even sadder still is that the silence from Nintendo has been deafening. Like, the Nintendo officials themselves. Like, I mean, there used to be somebody who would step out and try to quell the chaos and try to calm the people down. Like, Reggie Fils-Aimé. Even if he wasn't the best person in the world, and, sometimes he would lie through his teeth just for the company, he still ended up trying to quell a lot of audiences and try to give people reason to endorse in the company and to keep endorsing into the company. And heck, like, tell you the truth, Satoru Iwata also was a man that took the brunt too. And again, I'll get into a story about that a little bit later on. But no matter which way you look at it, these guys knew what they were doing when they stepped out to quell the panic and to quell the chaos. Right now, it seems like the current president doesn't even know what kind of he doesn't even know what kind of legacy this company has right now. And apparently he just wants to drag it through the mud, and that's upsetting. Like, I don't want to see it become a PlayStation. I don't want to see it become an Xbox. Like, honestly, if I were to price the Nintendo Switch 2 right now for myself, I would say that it should be at least $375. Because that's a competitive price compared to its competitors. It would definitely try to make it a little more it would give it a little more edge in beating out Xbox and Sony, And it would be a lot more fair for people. And honestly, people could go like, okay, that's a more fully realized price. That is a price that, you're able to buy more than one console with. Well, at least within the span of at least 2 to 3 years, even in terrible times. And you know what? Like, again, that's something that Nintendo is completely and totally missing. And then $80 for a game? Like, come on. Charging $60 for them? Sure, I can stomach it. But honestly, I do think that's also a bit too much as well. I mean, personally, I'd rather pay, like, no more than at least $30 for a game, $40 for a AAA. But then, of course, like, I don't know if Nintendo really does care about that anymore. And, no gaming company really cares about that because, you know what? Otherwise, we wouldn't see $70 now these days. We would still see, like, 30 or 40 or 50 or whatever. And I know a lot of people have also made the comment that, the game industry wouldn't be booming the way it is now and being such a moneymaker if it wasn't for inflation. But, it still doesn't necessarily mean that, inflation is the primary cause for these games going up. Because, we all know the primary cause, and that is corporate greed. Because most of these people are getting paid more. There's a lot of contract workers who are making these games. And, of course, not to mention, they're probably getting fired shortly after these games so that they don't have to pay them more or extra for any extra time that they're needed. Dirty scumbag tactics and moves. No job security whatsoever. And it's upsetting to see this, too, in the industry. It's just sickening. It makes me go like, man, gaming has really become more of a rich man's hobby than it is anybody's hobby, And it's upsetting to see this. But neither here nor there. Again, the real sad truth is that, yes, this does kind of tick me off with the prices being up to $80 to $70. And, I don't think Nintendo has shown any sign of lowering quite yet. But then again, this is still early, so I am recording this on Friday, just a couple days after the Direct. And to be honest, again, I don't know if Nintendo is going to lower these prices or not. Because actually, as of recording this video, Nintendo canceled any and all pre-orders, especially in the United States, only because they want to see how these tariffs play out. The tariffs that have been announced the day that the Nintendo Switch 2 got announced. Yeah, bold move, guys. Very bold. I have a funny feeling that either things may either get worse with this price debacle or better. It only depends on how these people at the company are going to see it. Because if things really do go to pot and they decide to release the Nintendo Switch 2 for more money, well, you bet your bottom dollar there's going to be people who are going to be going into stores, breaking open them glass containers, and walking out with them Switches. Because they're not going to be able to afford anything else. And if they really do want one, then honestly, what's the point of paying full price when you could just walk out with the store with them? And I know that's what big companies often tend to fear, but by that point, if the economy truly does go to pot where money doesn't mean anything, they're not going to be able to stop people from doing it either. Stop and think about it. It's true. But here's the thing. And if they decide to lower the price and make it cheaper, well, then that's actually great. That's grand. I love that. It makes it really more accessible to more people like me and my sisters and my mom and my dad and whoever else. To more common folk like me who also recognize Nintendo as a household name because of all the IPs that are attached to it and because of all the recognizable characters and the recognizable faces. That would help out a lot. No, this isn't necessarily the full silver lining part of this video because, again, there is an asterisk with it saying that it could take a darker turn. So, I don't know. It could go up. It could stay the same. It could lower. But we got to play it by ear. We got to check it out and see how it happens because we won't know until launch day. But I will say that this is the part where the ray of hope comes in. See, here's the thing. Nintendo... This isn't the first time Nintendo has done this, okay? In fact, when it comes down to it, Nintendo did this with the Nintendo 3DS. And let's just say that console didn't have the best of launches. It didn't really have that many iconic games on top of it. And, of course, when it comes down to it, the console was just way too freaking expensive. Almost $300 for a handheld console. Sheesh. Well, of course, Nintendo, it almost tanked Nintendo completely and totally to the point where drastic actions had to be taken. So, Satoru Iwata, you know what? In one of the best PR moves that I have ever seen, he decided to take a huge pay cut for himself while giving everybody else maybe a 10%, 5% pay cut. And then he decided to turn around and release an apology for the 3DS and made it cheaper. You know what? This set the eyes on the reputation of Nintendo. This set a precedent and a bar to meet for the reputation of Nintendo. This is something that most greedy companies and most CEOs will never, ever do because they want their money and they need their money. So more than likely, they're going to either cut paychecks for employees and lay off a whole bunch of people and blame it on the people who aren't buying it, despite the fact that some of the people who you laid off are the people that were probably buying it because they were the only people that could really afford it with an employee discount. And even then, you were reluctant to give that out. Like, you know, like, this is something that Nintendo has done that absolutely blew my mind back in the day. And you know what? This is something that actually still holds true, even for today. That Nintendo did an amazing move that saved their company, that allowed the Switch to come to light. It completely and totally changed the atmosphere and the tone for some of the people who were at with Nintendo and who were naysaying Nintendo, which made us realize that Nintendo was a company that was still aimed for more of the common man because they wanted to make game consoles for people like you and me who are poor, who can't afford like one of those bigger, nicer, fancier consoles that Microsoft and Sony has to offer, you know? Like, that's something that was an amazing move. And you know what? Chances are, if the Nintendo Switch 2 doesn't sell very well, if the Nintendo Switch 2 sells very, very, very poorly, you know what? We may end up with another 3DS situation here. Because if the current president takes a look at the situation and goes like, holy cow, we are losing a lot of money. Okay, what do I do here? And decides to take a look at the Nintendo history and goes like, wait, this is what our president did? Do I have to follow in his footsteps? If he follows within his footsteps, and I know it's a path that's already been trod, and gives himself a pay cut and decides to lower the price of the Switch 2, people would be happy with this. People would love it. I mean, the 3DS situation is the whole reason why a lot of people aren't going to buy the Nintendo Switch console on launch, and why they're probably going to end up waiting at least a year or two before they get their hands on a Switch 2. And, you know, this is the thing where I'd say, you know, if I was planning to, I do want to get a Switch 2 because I want to experience Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza and whatever fun games that they may have planned throughout the future. Like, I really do want to just wait like maybe a couple of years for like a major price drop or something, because I have a funny feeling that's probably what's going to end up coming, whether we want to admit to it or not, whether if Nintendo wants to admit to it or not. This is going to be pretty much inevitable because, you know, take away that kind of power and money from Nintendo, and they're going to start looking at it and going like, oh, shoot, we need to start getting desperate about this because this is real. People are starting to realize that we're being greedy scumbags, and we shouldn't be greedy scumbags, you know? Money talks, and it talks louder than words sometimes. This backlash alone probably isn't going to be able to do it. So we really do need to boycott the Switch 2, okay? For as long as we can. So that when they finally decide to lower the price and make it more accessible to average people, then you know what? At least we would probably be able to get a decent console for a fairly decent price. But anyway, what do you guys think about the Switch 2 situation? Let me know down in the comments below. And hey, if you're new here, please be sure to hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and comment down below. And I'll see you all in the next video. This is Superchocolatemilkshake, signing off.